Have a root beer. Don't be shy. My car's your car. Like root beers, don't you? Toast. Death to the of 2019.
Arnie, I can't toast to that.
What can you toast to?
How about us? Friendship.
Oh yeah, friendship. That's great. Yeah, friendship. Dennis. Ta-da! Wait, watch this. Now you don't see alignments like this. You don't see this anymore. Look at this.
I'm worried about you, Arnie.
Don't be jealous, Dennis. Nothing will happen to you as long as you don't get between me and Christine. And if you do, well, let's not kid ourselves, Dennis. You know what happens.
Coming to get you, Barbara.
This week, with SEMA only days away, can the ghouls complete this movie monster? A Hellephant that hath a fury, a 1,000 horsepower tribute to Christine.
Back on the air.
Things have been moving real well on our 58 Plymouth. From the time it showed up, we began the disassembly of it. So that is no different than any of the cars that we work on here, except that it's a body over frame. So yes, we had to dissect the body. We had to take the doors, the hood, the fenders, the inner fenders, strip it down to a bare hull, and then we were able to lift the body off of the frame. Once we did that, we were able to take the frame and disassemble it down. Once we had our frame stripped completely down to bare metal, we sent it off and had it powder coated. Once we got the frame back from powder coating, it was just a matter of putting the pieces in place that I had already welded the provisions up for. The engine, the transmission, the rear end, the drive shaft. We made special provisions in the frame for the exhaust work that needed to be done on the car. The body went over, got put on a rotisserie where we replaced the main floor, the trunk floor, and the bottoms of the quarters and the bottoms of the rockers.
You can't order parts for this car. Mark had to find a donor car. So that kind of threw us a little behind schedule just to start. Got the mud work all done, primed it, blocked it a few times more than normal. Those quarters were kind of challenging, but they came out great. We were able to get our final paint done on the car, get the roof painted white, cut and buffed, and the car came out gorgeous, and then roll it over here to assembly.
So when it comes to doing the exhaust on this car, it is a little different protocol than we normally do. Normally, we call up our friends at ECS, they send us out an exhaust system, we install it, it's perfectly bent, everything fits like it's supposed to. These systems just bolt on. In this case, it's all custom. So when you start doing custom stuff, there's a lot of thinking ahead, a lot of pre-fitment, a lot of steps that it takes to make sure that when you do go back together with it, things fit the way they're supposed to and you're not cutting them back apart and doing them 2 or 3 times. We've got just a rolling chassis. We've got our engine and transmission, drive shaft, rear end, everything's where it's supposed to be. So what I wanted to do was roll it over to the exhaust shop, have them build out at least the head pipes before we put that body on there. Because once you put that body on, you're not gonna have any access. And some of the points that need to be welded or bent are gonna be right in the way of that body. So that's why it's going over there before the body goes on it, to have the exhaust system installed. The folks that are doing it, they do quite a bit of this kind of stuff. We don't use them very often because obviously we're using the OEM stuff. So I gave them a picture of the car. I made some notes on the sides of the frame where I knew we couldn't go into with the exhaust. So I'm confident that they'll have the system in place where when we put the body on, we won't have an interference problem. Okay, the order of assembly on this car is once that frame's done, the exhaust system's in, you have a rolling chassis, it's time to put the body back on. And that's the very, very first step in a body over car. Bring that body in, set it down on the cushions. Make sure that it fits on the cushions right. You don't want a car leaning. You don't want it leaning forward, backwards, or looking crooked. If that frame's square, that body should be square. It needs to be in place, bolted down into its permanent home before you can start building out all of the pieces that go on it.
Most of the cars that we work on, they're unibodies. So being able to actually lift the entire body off a rolling chassis is just really cool. And that was the first time I've ever got to work on something like that. So it made things almost a lot easier.
This should go on nice and easily. We don't got anything to maneuver the engine around. It just seems pretty simple. Drop it down.
Yes. Kind of nice, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's do this thing. We're ready to lower it down. It looks good. Got all the body mounts in place.
Yes.
Here we go.
Lower it down, Alice.
Here we go, yo.
Should be nice and easy, right?
So once you line up all the studs and everything in your holes that you gotta mount the body to the actual frame, once you get that lined up, all it is you just lower it straight on top. Just make sure the engine clears the firewall, and then you just place your bolts right in with your spacers. Make sure you got all your spacers in. And it's just easy. I think the whole thing went together with maybe 10 bolts.
Okay, so you got those guys almost tight, or you are tight?
They're all tight.
Everything's tight.
Yep.
Okay, it's tight all the way around.
Yes, sir.
So we got the body down on the frame. Now we can pick it up by the frame, get the whole car up in the air. I still got to plumb out all the fuel. We've got lots to do to it, but I'd like to be able to get the fuel plumbed out, get the PCM, the ECM, and whatever other acronyms they have for this engine in place so we can put some power to it. I'd like to be able to start this week. So, good job. Nice.
Thank you.
The A-team right there. Who's Hannibal? I'm Hannibal, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm the A-team.
Uh-huh.
And you're probably Murdoch because you're nuttier than squirrel crap.
Okay.
You're probably the cool one. I mean, you got to be a guy, but there's no girls in the A-team. Who is the cool one?
Mr. T?
Car looks great. We got it over here. We got about 8-10 days to get this thing put together. And it really comes down to mainly Mark and Doug just working around the clock. You know, we'll see if it gets done or not.
You know, this one's a little more stressful than normal for me for the fact that it's way out of my wheelhouse, my comfort zone. I constantly calling Fury Jim up to ask questions about how something goes together. And so with 10 days, I mean, 10 days would be a bit of a push on one of our regular cars that I could go out back to any of the 110 cars and look and see how something goes. So in this case, yeah, it's a lot more tension and stress.
SEMA's very interesting here at the shop. Last year we built the A100. That was nobody's fault. We got a last minute late start. They wanted it there, no problem. Christine, you know, it is a problem because when we left SEMA, they gave us the 1,000 horsepower Hemi. They tell Mark, hey, do whatever you want, put it in whatever you want. He says, no problem. We get back here, he already knows what car he wants to build. So we have 13 months to build a car. And yet for some reason, April or May comes around and it's like, maybe we should start on the car. You know, maybe we shouldn't. We got plenty of time. So no matter what, we just always have this huge time crunch, no matter how he tries to plan for it. So for future, you know, I think we need to remove Mark completely from SEMA stuff. Mopar needs to call, say, this is what I want, here's our time, and let us schedule it in.
So if you were to ask me, why are we down to this ridiculous timeline, this stupid timeline? I'm gonna be completely transparent with you. I'm gonna be honest, and I'm gonna tell you it's Will's fault. If he were the Iceman, the ice tray, you know what I'm saying? Like ice cubes, cold, right? So cold they're hot. Does that make sense? What's the question again now?
You have to pre-fit everything that you do. If we just try to wing it, you know, from the rotisserie, or if it's on a bin pack, those cars move a lot. So it's just super critical to get this car supported, get the car put together, make sure it's good so that way when he's bolting it together, there's no surprises or something doesn't fit or we gotta shave it down here or have to repaint something. And with the time crunch that SEMA always gives no matter what, you have to pre-fit everything to just avoid that problem because there's no time to go back and redo anything.
You know, we're waiting for parts from other places, so when we can actually do some pre-fitting in places that we can. It's just gonna make the whole assembly process so much quicker. With the deadline that we have and the parts that we have, to be able to pre-fit that stuff, like the doors, we pre-fit the doors, but once we got the fenders on, you know, the doors weren't shutting correctly, so there had to be a whole lot of work like that, just unknown stuff that kind of just pops up during the process.
I'm excited to hear it run. You know, it's a 1,000 horsepower Hemi. We got the first one. It's not like there's a lot of, you know, we heard the one run in Vegas, but that's all we have. So I'm excited to get this thing put together, get the exhaust on it, run it. I'm excited to drive it.
So with this time crunch and the limited time that we have to actually assemble this car, you got to be extremely careful that you don't chip this paint. You don't want to piss Will off. So this car is actually going, it's going to SEMA too. It's got to look supreme, so you don't want any chips or anything to happen.
A lot of these parts we were working with were very delicate parts. I mean, you could literally bend them just by pressing on them. So yeah, it was a really tricky, delicate operation to build such a beautiful car.
The thing I've always hated on cars is quarter and door glasses. Just, I hate it. I hate it a lot worse putting it together when we have no idea where everything goes. We have 100 pieces that have been detailed. They're beautiful. It's all ready to go together. But it's like an erector set without instructions. You don't know where anything goes. It's taxing. And the thing about it is you can spend all day putting a quarter regulator together to find out that it doesn't seat all the way up, or it doesn't seat all the way down, or it binds halfway going up because you have something in wrong. So to me, the part I've dreaded the very most of the build is the part we're at right now. When it comes to the body assembly, it's a great example of how I'm used to working on a unibody car. It's all one from one end to the other, so all the strength lies in that. In this car, the frame has a certain amount of strength, the body has a certain amount of strength. We reinforced the body before we ever cut it apart, made sure things couldn't move, pre-fit everything. We had great gaps, great everything, right up to the point where everything was painted and we're trying to put it together. You put the inner fender on, you bolt the left-hand outside fender to it or the right-hand outside fender to it to find out that it doesn't fit up against the door. So you go back to the door and you move it back, or you move it up, or you move it down. You go back to the fender again. Now you have a good gap there, but the back of the door's touching against the quarter panel. It's just like it moved. I'm not superstitious, and I doubt very much that that car is possessed by anything. I doubt that very much. But the panels that I had perfectly aligned right before they got painted, and paint doesn't make things grow. Paint doesn't make a fender not fit. It just doesn't add up. That tells me that things move. No matter how you slice it, when it comes up that you're cutting an area on a door to make it fit where it fit before, things have moved. So what? It is what it is. No matter where you're at on what car, putting doors on, fenders on, inner fenders on, after the paintwork's done is always nerve-wracking. It's easy enough to just make a chip. When you're having to really manipulate them to get them to go where they're supposed to go, that even increases the odds of doing some damage to it. So yeah, I'm always nervous when it comes to putting a new panel on a new, freshly painted car. Murphy's Law, right? That's what I say. Anything can happen. One little nudge, somebody says, yeah, I got the door, and they don't got the door. And it comes back and chips the edge of it. It's fine. It's a solid red car. You can do a brush touch on it. Nobody probably even know it was ever there. But you do enough of that, and all of a sudden it's going to look like salt and pepper. And nobody want to go to SEMA and say, ladies and gentlemen, here's a salt and pepper pristine. What do you think? Right? And then they do that laugh like Eddie Murphy did. Ha ha, you the man, Gandas from Ice Spot.
Being able to get help whenever we can on some of these cars when we got these, short time frames. George is able to actually come out here, help get stuff put on the car. So anytime we can get help like that is just awesome.
It was quite a hectic process dealing with all of the parts being out to various vendors and waiting for them to come back. And you needed all the parts so you could put things on, and it seemed like a lot of times we were missing different parts that were holding up other parts, and sometimes we'd put things on just to trial fit them, not knowing how they were going to fit. Then we'd have to take them back off and wait for the rest of the components to get back so that we could finally get everything together. Yeah, it was a long, tedious process.
You know, trying to buff these cars out when they're working right next to you is a pain in the butt. You know, you get an area looking nice, then Mark comes in with his oversized fingers and smears all over. It makes a mess. So when it's in the paint shop, you can go from area to area, go back to an area. You don't have that luxury doing it this way, but you got to make the best of it, and it has to get done. You have to get the cut and buff all done, because once the chrome goes on, you can't buff it. So if you got that big molding going down the side, once that's on there, you can't go up there and get right next to it to buff. So you got to cut that paint flat and get everything looking perfect before Mark starts assembling all the decoration that goes on the car.
When you talk about a car having a show finish on it, typically there's a few things that make that a show car finish. Now, a lot of people might claim they have a show car finish when they just have a driver finish. One is the car should be flat, meaning when you look down the side of it, you shouldn't see any deviations. You should be able to shave in that thing from 50 feet away. There shouldn't be one warble. You should be able to walk fluorescent lights up and down the side of it with your eyes like that, and they should not do any swimmy stuff. That's step one in making sure that you have a flat car. Two is the depth and the gloss. That's where the wet sand and buffing comes in. So I can't put a door handle, a belt molding, a mirror, a vent glass, a run channel, a bumper, body side moldings anywhere on this car until those areas have been wet sanded and buffed to a glossy finish.
So things get pretty chaotic when you got 4 people working around this car all at one time. You got headliner going in, you got wheel buffing, and you know, I'm trying to get electrical stuff done just to get this car to be able to run. It gets really crowded really quick.
Larry's great. He's just a genuine salt of the earth, good-hearted guy that'll do anything for you, anytime, even when he's probably way too busy to do it. I've been working with him for 25 years, so he's done a lot of cars for us. He's the only guy that I trust with these cars and that will come out to the shop and do the work for us. That's so key. Take our famous comeback car, the 70 Coronet RT Hemi 4-speed, one of $2 million car. Do you really want to send that out to a shop across town and hope that they put the top on and don't scratch anything? Out of your supervision? Might be just fine, but I love that he comes here, that he's mobile. So no, he's part of the architecture here at Graveyard Cars, and I hope that he always is. It gets to be a cluster when you have these cars that have tight deadlines on them. Every mechanic who has an agenda, subcontractors like Larry, the upholstery guy, who has an agenda to put the headliner in, and Will's over here trying to do a buff. I need to put the bumper on, but I can't put the bumper on because he's doing a buff in the area that the bumper goes onto. I can't put the handles in because he has to buff around the door handle opening areas. Meanwhile, Larry's shaking the car like it's going out of style, trying to get everything pulled tight. That adds a lot of stress to things. And mostly what it is you know how to do the next step. It's just hard to do when there's so many people involved in it. That's what I mean by a cluster. So if you're adding up a tally sheet on stress on a daily basis, I've been doing it a long time. It takes a lot to rock the ice trees world, but this one's building up to it. Because you have the car that has to go, everybody waiting for it, employees all over it like a bunch of monkeys on a football. Nothing can get done. One guy shakes something while you're trying to put something else on and it gets scratched. You have 140 pieces of chrome and anodizing that are halfway across the country getting plated, hoping that they're not having the same problems that you're having. And any of those things could go bad. Anything could go bad. You talk about a 60-year-old taillight bezel. They strip the anodizing off of it. They go to polish it to give it a shine. They burn through it. Well, you're not going to go down to the local parts store. You're done. You're sunk. Your battleship is sunk.
Putting Christine together is, I mean, it's truly a puzzle. Not only could nobody really help, it's really only Mark, Doug, and Justin, because they're the only ones that have any knowledge of the car because they tore it apart. So there's been a bunch of instances that we've run into putting a part on and we've had to take it back off because 2 other pieces got to go on first. So a lot of times during this build, something will go together and you got to start all over again because we don't have the first-hand knowledge on this type of car.
When you're talking about a car that has so many components, because back then they just did. They were proud of their cars, and there was a lot of things that went in to show how proud they are. just to build out a dash is probably 60 pieces by the time you're all done building out the dash. So a lot of it is when it's laying out on a table in front of you and you don't have a reference right next to it, and maybe you don't have that great of a picture of it, it's kind of a puzzle. I don't mind building puzzles. I used to do it all the time as a kid, but at least you could build the frame and then you start working and finding pieces that look similar together in a different shape and you put them together. In this case, you just do your best to try to start what you think is going to be the first part that has to go on. You don't want to put a door handle, a belt molding, a wing vent in if the very first thing that has to go in is the door lock cylinder or the latch mechanism or the regulator for the windows. So that's the part that becomes a puzzle.
There were a lot of mysteries as far as how to put that thing back together because we didn't have any reference anywhere, and parts were really hard to come by for that car. Although Mark did find some people who specialized in that car, and that was really helpful to us to get that thing back together.
So one of the really hectic things is when everybody's out here, you got tools scattered all over the place. We have tables and benches filled with parts for this car. Sometimes you feel like you're just not making any progress. For me, I had to deal with a lot of wiring. Everybody's all at lunch and I'm still over here. I'm putting the car together, you know, doing other odds and ends stuff while I can. But it's just hard to move around here when you got parts scattered all over the place.
Look at it like a choir. It needs a maestro, right? I'm the maestro. I may not be the best maestro in the world, but make sure that guy puts that part on. Make sure this guy puts this part on. Hit all the notes over here. While that's happening, follow up on this over here. You are orchestrating this entire group of people over a very, very expensive and rare car in a very, very short period of time. While I may not be the greatest maestro in the world, I'd like to see somebody do a better job of maestroing under the exact same circumstances.
So what made this process even harder is about a week before my son was born, so I was only doing half days so I could get home, help my wife out with the baby. So it's just a lot of added stress when I wanted to be able to be here.
Justin did a great job on following the instructions, and that's the main thing when it comes to the plug-and-play controller units for these. They're a simple system for the end user. There's a lot goes into them. But if you follow the instructions and you put the things in where they belong, then they should work. He did a great job on everything from wiring the radiator fans all the way back to the fuel pumps. He had all that stuff wired in great. So when it comes to the installation of the chrome and trim and ornamentation on that car, I had a few major advantages. And that is, that's a very well photographed car. A 58 Plymouth Fury, you have your original photographs that the manufacturer put out in their brochures, of course, different colors. And then you've got about 1 million Christine tribute cars out there. Some of them very high-end, very accurate. So I had a lot of reference material to look at. I could call Fury Jim up, and I did many times. You don't even know if you're supposed to, if you have what you need. So those are also calls that had to go in way early to make sure that the contractors that were doing our chrome work had the actual parts to do. When it came to the overall assembly, we were able to reference our original photos from when we took the car apart and lots of online photos of how things should go together. We planned everything out at the front end of this car, and there's a lot going into it.
So with the 426 HELLEPHANT engine, you actually have a radiator, you have an intercooler, and you have the supercharger cooler.
Now we did a great job here. We used a factory Mopar radiator and cooling fans and supercharger cooler, intercooler they call it. But there's another one, another cute little radiator that has to set in front of the main radiator. Didn't count on that.
Mopar actually supplied a bracket to actually mount the supercharger cooler. I wasn't able to use exactly what it was, so I went with George, and we kind of mocked something up, cut it.
We put it where it looked really good, which was in front of the original radiator. I thought I had plenty of room for my filler panel and my vertical lock support and the grill. Well, we didn't. it doesn't fit. The lines are all in the way of the grille support mounting brackets and the headlight doors. So this is one of those things that, what are you gonna do, just cut out half the grille? It's gonna look a little silly, right? This car's supposed to be done, not halfway through being done. So that does have me worried right now. So being this is the very, very first of its kind, there were a few setbacks. There are 3 radiators basically that make up the cooling system on that. You have your main radiator that runs your engine, then you have your supercharger radiator, and then you have another one. We didn't count on that one.
I had it all put together and everything was great. We were signed off, it was good to go. But then we had the hood had to get put on, and then we went to go put the grill on. Nothing fit, so I had to restart the whole process on the supercharger cooler.
So when it came to the extra radiator, it's a small unit, but it was in the way of our grill. The grill supports mostly.
So once we found that out, I tore it all apart, and I was just kind of brainstorming with Mark to see where we can put it. I was thinking about putting it kind of on the side by the engine, but you really need some good airflow with that.
So we had to reroute 2 of the grill mounting brackets to the firewall of the car. And one of the hoses that was coming out was in the way of one of the mounting brackets.
After some time thinking, I just decided to actually mount it right up under the fender, right in front of the front tire.
Once we made those modifications very carefully, without a millimeter to spare, it fit in there the way it was supposed to. So we just got in our big order from JR Chrome. He did all of the pot metal chroming and the regular metal chroming for us, gorgeous. We got all of our anodizing from Anodizing Solutions back. We have everything now to put the car together finally. So what that means is, how did we do on all of our pre-fit stuff? It's really coming down now to seeing if the proof is in the pudding. If we pre-fit everything the way it's supposed to, and we made sure we made provisions for all of this stainless and all of this trim, we should be able to bolt the car together in a reasonable amount of time and still make our deadline for SEMA.
Sometimes you feel pretty helpless when one of the companies said that they shipped it out, but then you get a call later saying that they shipped it to a completely different state. We were able to get those things in and put on the car.
When all the parts finally came back from all the vendors and everything was laid out in a massive layout of parts, it was really a challenge to work over everybody and try to get all this together at the same time in all the various corners of the car that we were working on, so it was very challenging.
Probably biggest thing that is recognizable on that car is that insert and body side molding. It's beautiful. Now, up until 6 or 8 months ago, there was some generic stuff out there that people would use. It was the wrong pattern. It was the wrong finish. It was probably like tinfoil on steroids. At a glance, it looked fine. Jim went and had it reproduced. So when I got hold of him and told him about the car, he says, well, you're gonna be happy because I'm actually making these now. This is the exact finish, fit, thickness, and hatch marks. So Fury Jim duplicated that to perfection. It's not that installing these inserts is difficult, it's just a process and you have to be careful. Jim told me how he did his, which I followed the same thing, using a rubber mallet on all the corners to tap it softly. Your moldings have to be where they're supposed to go, then the insert, and then the top molding down over it. He had gave me a couple of tips about gluing it at the very, very back edge where a purse or a set of keys could grab it. He says, good idea, just put a little spot glue, so we did that. It wasn't that it was difficult, it was just very painstakingly time-consuming.
This year was totally avoidable. We shouldn't be in the circumstance that we are in. But like I say, Mark sits up in that office just kind of doing his own thing, not really aware of his surroundings. You'll find where he walks around a lot, not really paying attention to much. So that's what kills us. So hopefully moving forward, you get a better plan, actually execute it, and maybe get a car done in time, hit the red carpet, and everybody won't be so stressed out like they are currently.
Some of the biggest problems we had were not having adequate backup parts in anticipation of things that break when they come apart and you don't have any replacement. To try to repair something like that and not being able to get it done in time is a real problem. So it just seems like we need to have a lot more backup parts in advance before we start a restoration like that.
Christine's the reason I was wearing my my wrist wrap, because I had to jump in there and start doing body work on it, and I was working long hours during the day here, 10 hours, and then going out at night and working another 3 or 4 hours doing body work, and it just wiped out my wrist, because you're holding a sanding block like this. You're pinching it. It's the worst scenario for carpal tunnel syndrome.
It really does make you wonder how they managed to build such a complicated car on an assembly line back in that time and come out with something so intricate and beautiful, and all the features of that car are just amazing things compared to what we have nowadays on mass production assembly lines. It really does make you wonder how they built such beautiful cars back in the day.
It's an impressive sounding engine, but 1,000 horsepower would be. I'm looking forward to hearing it in Christine.
So I'm really looking forward to be able to hear this engine start up. Been working a long time on getting all this wiring done and making sure the first time I turn that key, it's gonna fire right up.
So I'm really looking forward to seeing that 1,000 horsepower engine shaking that 1958 Plymouth. That's gonna be some pretty cool stuff. One of my jobs, among the many here, is to keep the morale up. Ooh, woogity boogity, woogity. In that same spirit, you don't want to take a chance of letting the air out of any sails. I had heard recently that we aren't going to be having Christine at the red carpet event, which is disappointing from my standpoint because you work so hard. It's okay. I don't need to have my name chanted. That's it? Really? Do it one more time. Do it one more time. Now, pay attention.
Hey, from Graveyard Carz, Mark Warman.
All right. For the guys, I know they get pretty thrilled about it, so I'll have to let them know that, but I don't think it's any kind of a game changer.
I'm super excited to hear this run. Like I said, it's the first one. We have no idea, 1,000 horsepower. So the thing's gonna sound amazing, and I'm just overly excited. It's something new here, and it's always nice to do something different.
Little do they know, I actually got to fire this car up while they were all at lunch, so I already kind of know what this car sounds like.
Car sounds amazing. We don't have the exhaust 100%, so it's a little bit louder, so it sounds great. I don't know how much of a different sound it's going to have once the exhaust is complete, but right now the thing sounds awesome. Ready to get this car on the road.
When we first fired this engine up, this thing sounded real healthy. Sounded really good. That was exciting. It's like, wow, this thing is alive now.
And then we found out that we're not going to the red carpet, which is a huge bummer. This is the second time we weren't able to make that red carpet.
A little butthurt because we've never had a successful red carpet yet. It's awesome that the car runs. Everything's perfect on it. The disappointing is, you know, Mark's not gonna be able to drive this across the red carpet because you got a lot of Mopar fans that are waiting to hear this and waiting to see it. It's a little disappointing, but it is what it is, and we'll still get the car done on time.
I think she's ready to go out and take care of business. 1,000 horsepower is going to propel it down the road without any trouble at all. It's a nasty sounding, throaty thing. It just rumbles that entire car. And I know you can put a lot of engines and stuff, but this isn't a funny car. This is a daily driver that still looks like a 58 Plymouth Fury, but it's packing 1,000 horsepower under the hood. So we've had kind of mixed reviews on my decision to put the engine in. I'd say the majority of people think it's really cool that we're putting the 1,000 horsepower Hellefant in Christine. A lot of them are just movie fans and they love it. There's some that say, well, why didn't you put it in another muscle car? And I always look at it like it's a personal choice. There's no right answer here. For me, I wanted to put the most evil engine in the most evil car ever.
You know, I was one of the people to criticize Mark for picking this car. You know, I would have done something different. But 100% being honest right now, that motor dropped right in. I mean, everything just fit as far as the drivetrain goes on this car. So honestly, it was like it was just meant to be. And looking at the paint job, the color of the car, and just how sinister it is, it does make sense and it pulled together quite nicely.
So we're down to just the last few things on the car. The grill, I had actually sent the grill back to Fury Jim for a disassembly. Then he sent it back to me. I sent it out to Anodized Solutions, and they did the stripping, the polishing, and the re-anodizing of it. But when it comes back, it's, I didn't count it, 50 pieces.
And there were a lot of pieces. It was almost like a lot of little bones. But when it come time to put all that back together, oh my gosh, what a tedious process. Laying it out, lining up all the pieces, and then tweaking it all to get it to stay together.
And there are vertical support brackets that have to be pinched over each and every one of those bars that make it up. And there's a lot of it there. So it's not that it's difficult, but it's extremely time consuming.
Yeah, it's pretty stressful when this car is just filled with a ton of stainless steel pieces that have to be polished.
And when you talk about the grill in a 58 Fury, you're talking about one of the biggest spots on the car, the thing that really jumps out at you.
The bumpers are massive. They have to be sent out for chrome.
The front and the rear bumpers have not showed up yet. We're waiting on them. They were the last things to come out. We knew they would be the last things, but we need them to show up.
In these small time frames, we're relying on these people to get these things back to us.
We need them to be here because if we put them on and they don't fit, I need time to be able to modify a bracket, tweak something, make it work. I don't have any time for body and paint work.
Because if they fail, we fail.
The last two pieces to come in from the chrome shop was the front and rear bumpers. Pretty important pieces, but they were big pieces, and I understood why they took longer than everything else. But unboxing them, putting them on that car, absolutely beautiful work. 50-year-old, 60-year-old parts that look better than they ever did when they were brand new.
The paint came out great. It's a beautiful color, but man, once they started putting the chrome on there, those bumpers are huge, the grille, and all the ornamentation on the outside of it, the car just is absolute showstopper.
So once you put on all the trim panels and you get all that chrome set on the car, it just really starts to pop and that red comes out. It just looks gorgeous.
Cap off that car. They're the cherry on the sundae. They really are what finishes it. Because this car uses the wings, the bumper wings. It wraps around the back 9 inches of the car and at the front 9 inches of the car. It really finishes that car up. If you watch the movie Pristine, it's those bumper wings that really sell that car's toughness. We had setbacks, we had hurdles, and you always do.
Well, good. I'm glad you deal with what I deal with all day long. All day long.
When you calculate everything in, the guys did a fantastic job. The car is beautiful. The car is stunning.
It was just amazing how pretty that car was. Just stunning. Just a beautiful car. It's just so nice.
If 10 is perfect as though it came down on a cloud and was done, I would probably say the car's a 9. Because there is no such thing as perfect. And especially given the timeline that we had on it.
I'm proud of the way the car came out, just disappointed that it's not done.
If I had any regret at all about this year's SEMA vehicle, it would be, I don't want to say this because I try not to be negative. I think I would have started pushing Will earlier.
We got to start sooner. And I give Mark a hard time because ultimately it is his fault. But we do have 100 cars here that got to be built. So stopping here to do something else is difficult.
If we were able to do this car again or do this whole process over, if we started sooner, we were less under pressure to be able to get this thing in such a small time frame, I'm pretty sure we would have been able to get this full car completely done.
So next year, I already know what vehicle I'm going to build next year for the show. I'm going to start pounding on him in January to make sure it's done in time for the show. So that's the only regret I have. I should have rode Will harder.
The huge regret's going to be the same thing every year. We should have started sooner. I don't know, it's 2020. I don't know what we're building for SEMA this year.
Mark, it's February right now.
Huh?
It's February right now.
Yeah, I know, he's working on it.
He says he doesn't know what car we're building.
There's been no talk and we have no plans, so I can see it already starting to happen again.
I'm not here to put anybody down. Get him down, hold him down, put him down. But the fact of the matter is, he's a procrastinator. I get a task, I get it done. You say, Mark, you got to be here. I've already got all the plans laid out. Chink, 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 chink. Will, he just puts it up there in that scrambled head of his, and he just gets to it when he gets to it.
You know, and it's unfortunate that Mark did pick this car because nobody could help assemble it. And Mark can see how valuable I am here, because the one time I don't help in a build, the car's not actually complete when it's going to SEMA.
This is what happens when you don't take the bull by the horns and get her done. Whatever that hillbilly dude that tells those jokes about getting things done, get her done, man. Get her done. Sorry about the hillbilly thing, I meant Appalachian American.
It's unfortunate we didn't get the car 100%. because you are at the biggest stage in the world when it comes to car shows.
So while I'm extremely happy that the car is showable, it isn't 100% done. For me internally, it's disappointing. I don't think it makes a heck of a bit of difference at all to anybody that's at the show.
So having our car there representing graveyard cars and not having a 100% complete car sucks.
Hopefully people don't focus too much on the stuff that we didn't get put on the car. The good thing is it was a lot of interior stuff. Hopefully we can have those windows rolled up and they don't see it, but.
We had some issues with some of the vent windows and the driver door glass that we weren't able to resolve, and so she left minus her driver and passenger door windows.
The only thing you can do is step back and say, they got 95% of it, make the best of it, and just hope that we can actually finish the car next year. And out of the 4 builds that we've done, this is the first one that wasn't actually 100% complete.
I think the car will do really well down there. It's got all the right colors, it's got the right engine. It's the only one that's gonna be there. So if somebody wants to pick on something about where's the wing vent windows, they might say, where's your Hellefant? You know?
She's just such a beautiful car that I think a lot of people can really respect what we got done. And as soon as we get a chance, we'll get her finished up, and then she's really going to be beautiful.
Yeah, once that car comes back from SEMA, we'll be able to just go to town on this car. If we need to take something off and redo something, we have all the time in the world to actually be able to get that thing done.
It was a huge build. It was out of our wheelhouse. The car looks amazing. Everyone did pull together the best they could. So to get it where it's at with the time frame that we had, you couldn't be more proud.
I'm pretty proud of all the work that we were able to get done on Christine. This thing looks almost identical to what the car in the movie actually looked like.
I'm as proud as anybody could be for my shop, for the car, for the reputation of the car, for everybody who's helped us look good. Thank you for everybody that helped us look good.